I'd like to continue my reading out of this book, The Visions of St. Francis of Rome, Hell, Purgatory, and Heaven Revealed. Forgive my voice. It is a little bit of allergy season, and of course I choose to be outside. Figure the irony. All of the comments I have received on these readings have been positive, every single one. There was one person who read that said, I can't do this anymore. It's making me feel it's impossible to get to heaven. But I want to speak to specifically that person, saying, this is exactly why we should read these. You, commenter, are living a life that's trying to get you to heaven. I am starting out by reading what she talked about hell. And literally, when I read this, and as for the rest of us, I just want to use this to scare the hell out of us so that we can choose to not sin these particular sins. I believe God sent St. Francis to heaven, hell, and purgatory so that she could come back and specifically put these things into writing, put these things into video. He knew that I would be doing this video hundreds of years later. So we need to spread the word, because one of the things that she said and that other mystics have said is that most of the people in hell believe that hell doesn't exist. So I hope that my reading of this, as well as this book written by, of course, Father Robert J. Nixon is the one who translated it from Latin into English. But again, everyone's asking, how do I get this book? Go to Tan Books, The Visions of St. Francis of Rome, Hell, Purgatory, and Heaven Revealed. All right, so I'm going to actually read here the geography of hell and the state of limbo. At the entrance of hell, there was an enormous imposing inscription written in grim and dreadful lettering of dark crimson, the color indeed of congealed blood. This ominous inscription ran thus: Behold, this place is hell, where souls condemned must dwell. Of all the lands accursed, this is by far the worst. From pain there is no rest. Within these realms unblessed, the flames here burn forever, the torment ceases never. Before I continue to read, there was a person who commented, it seems horrifying that these people lived 80, 90 years and they did these horrible things, but that these pains go on forever and ever and ever. And they said, it just seems like it's so dreadful, they should just stop. Like maybe after 1,000 years, shouldn't God stop? I'm not God. I don't know why. I've had those kind of thoughts too. Just let them disappear after they've been tortured. But I guess God is a just God, and he says, if you're going to be rewarded in heaven, it's going to be eternal. If you're going to be condemned to hell, that's going to be eternal as well. So what St. Francis saw, she said, in this dreaded region, Blessed Francis was to see, hear, and sense many things of infinite and indescribable terror. It was, as she recalls, as if she was taken out of herself and suffused with such an intense and all-consuming fear and horror that it could scarcely be imagined or put into words. But at the same time, she felt a certain powerful and benign presence beside her, which she could not, however, perceive with her physical senses. Nevertheless, this mysterious and kindly presence seemed to urge her to take courage and not to let dread overcome her. Now, the entrance to hell, to this infernal place, had been, as has been mentioned, unimaginably dreadful and imposing. But within, it was even worse, much, much worse. For there were dense clouds and opaque shadows of an almost palpable darkness, which no human words could ever suffice to express, nor human senses could comprehend. This realm, hell, was divided into 3 parts: an uppermost part, a middle part of greater and more severe torments than the first, and finally, a nethermost region, where the punishments and sufferings reached infinite and unbounded extremity. Between each of these parts or levels, vast and empty regions of space were interposed, which were filled with hideous black nebulae and swirling, lightless mists. Of all the creatures and entities which inhabited this infernal kingdom, there was one who stood out as the largest and most dominant of them all, an enormous and ancient dragon Indeed, this beast was present in all three of the levels of hell, with his head in the uppermost level, his body in the middle level, and his tail reaching into the nethermost region. His gigantic and monstrous head, posited in the top level, was turned towards the entrance, and his hideous mouth gaped open, with his tongue hanging out in a sinister fashion. Out of this opened orifice poured a fire that burned with scorching intensity, yet it remitted no light. A putrescent and nauseating stench also issued from his mouth. Similarly, black fire, hot, fetid, and lightless, also seeped through his eyes and ears. There Frances, the handmaid of God, heard also great wailings and cries. These ululations, or lamentations, filled the ear, articulating horrid and appalling blasphemies, together with most wretched laments of dolor, or pain, and distress. And as Frances attempted to describe to her spiritual father the torments and lamentations which she had perceived, she herself was filled with an unspeakable pain and sorrow, and she began to break down in tears. Indeed, she narrated that as she witnessed this multitude of horrors, she felt completely overwhelmed, as if she were about to faint away. But then she recalled that at that point, the unseen, benign presence who had exhorted her to courage earlier, again comforted her. Later on, it was revealed to her that the spiritual presence was in fact none other than the mighty archangel Raphael himself. Frances saw there also the prince of the fallen angels, Satan, or Lucifer. His countenance was utterly terrifying, and he sat positioned upon a wooden beam in the middle region of the inferno. His head reached to the uppermost region, while his feet reached to the bottom level. Thus he lay, effectively occupying all three parts of hell simultaneously. His arms and legs were extended outwards, yet in such a way that they bore no likeness to a cross, for that holy form is strictly not permitted in hell. He was crowned with a kind of sinister tiara, resembling the antlers of some great deer or elk. And out of the main horns of these antlers, innumerable smaller horns sprang forth, with sparks and flames issuing from each. Metallic chains glowing red hot were bound around his hands, feet, and torso. One of these chains extended from Satan to the great dragon that Frances had seen before. Frances, the handmaid of the Lord, also saw innumerable other lesser demons. These were passing freely in and out of hell to the world, and from the world back to hell. To the accompaniment of dreadful clamors and outcries, they dragged with them the condemned souls of those whom they had managed to ensnare or deceive. The demons mocked and derided these lost souls mercilessly, with such appalling utterances that they cannot be repeated here, nor committed to writing. And Frances herself sensed the pain and despair which filled these unfortunate victims with such a degree of intensity that even as she tried to describe it to her spiritual director, she again broke down utterly in tears of piteous melancholy. These demons, grasping the souls which they had claimed for hell, led them through the grim entrance of the unhallowed inferno. They hurled some of them into the flaming mouth of the great dragon, which gaped open nearby. These souls were swallowed by the dragon, but then after a while foully regurgitated, covered in disgusting and acrid mucus. At this point they were led before a certain magistrate or higher officer of the demons. Before this fiery infernal magistrate, the case of each particular soul was carefully considered. Then the most appropriate region of hell and form of torments were determined for it on the basis of the sins and crimes it had committed and the vices to which it had succumbed during its earthly life. They were then forcibly taken to their destined place of punishment to the cacophonous and clamorous accompaniment of indescribable weepings and failings. Frances then related that the journey of these souls to their destined places was by no means quick or immediate, as it was, as she later saw, for the souls who were released from purgatory and carried off to enjoy the glories of heaven. For both heaven and hell consist of 3 distinct levels. In the case of the supernal realm of eternal glory and splendor, the 3 levels are in ascending order: the heaven of the stars, the heaven of crystal, and the Empyrean heaven. Both the 3 levels of heaven and the 3 levels of hell are separated from each other by incalculable distances. But to return specifically to hell, on account of the dense obsidian darkness and impenetrable opaque fogs which pervade it, all motion and movement there were rendered indescribably slow, laborious, and oppressively painful. The saints saw that some of the souls led through the gates of hell by various demons were not cast into the mouth of the dragon. Rather, they were led directly to the aforementioned magistrate of the demons and stood before him unchained. But they were then similarly judged and then handed over to the appropriate demons to undergo their due torments. These were the souls who were guilty of less serious crimes and were therefore to remain on the uppermost level of this inferno. Even there, though, their torments were endless and unspeakable. This upper region was populated by numberless demons, some in the form of vipers, some in the form of toads, some in the form of other horrid and nameless beasts. Here were tormented the souls of Christians who were negligent in their faith, or who failed to make proper confession before passing away. Frances was appalled and shocked to witness this. But her invisible companion, who was and has been noted the Archangel Raphael, again urged her to be strong and take courage. At this point, Frances perceived another being or entity, an angel, not a devil, who stood near the gates of hell. The place where he was located was a little beyond the reach of the great dragon. Excuse me. And beyond the grasp of Lucifer, and chained as he was to his wooden beam. Nor was it touched at all by the noxious flames which emerged from the inferno. This place is called Limbo. Now I want to stop right here, because remember, this was done in the year 13. She was born in 1384 and died in 1400 something. And remember, this is private revelation. The church has approved this, but what they said is they're talking about, she mentions a limbo kind of place, which the church has never approved. So remember, she was seeing these things through the lens of the times with which she lived. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to read further. I'll let you get the book to read that. So this was the beginning of how she describes the torments in hell. And the videos so far have been talking about what is hell like for different sins. But be patient, because I'm going to next get to what was purgatory and what was heaven. And I think you're going to be blessed with those visions. But let's use this to remind ourselves that there are people in hell, as she said here, shocked to witness that people in hell were Christians who were negligent of their faith or who failed to make proper confession before passing away. Don't be that person. Get to confession. Receive the sacraments. If you're Protestant and you think this is ridiculous, do your research. Go back. If your pastor says something, well, who gave him permission? Who did he get his knowledge from? And then who gave that person the knowledge? There's always going to be a stopping point. And the Catholic Church is the only one that stops with Christ. All of the other ones were begun after that. And, you know, I used to care about hurting people's feelings. I don't want to hurt your feelings. I just want you to go back to truth. We're all messed up, but truth is right here. God's Word, the Bible. Let's study it, take it in, and win as many souls as we can for the kingdom. I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. Thanks for watching this Bacon Bit. And as always, I want to remind you to live your life sunny side up.